From ISIS fighters to Julian Assange, there have been a number of stories in the news recently about people losing their citizenship. Not even their second citizenship, but sometimes their first citizenship. And so the question has been asked, if I go out and get a second passport, what are the odds that one day it will be taken away from me? I'm going to share my thoughts. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. I'm the best-selling author of this book and the founder of Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. That includes things like getting second passports, which a lot of people, including a lot of Westerners, have seen the value in to at least have a plan B. To know that if things go bad in your home country, whether it's taxes going up, riots, chaos, a restriction of freedoms, a total change in the way of everyday life, you'll have an option. You'll have a place to go. You'll have a place that needs to accept you. And so when there have been stories in the news recently about people losing their citizenship, the question naturally is, well, is that a risk for me? There was a story in NPR recently talking about Julian Assange and how Ecuador has revoked his citizenship. He is, of course, the founder of WikiLeaks. He is in British prison. The article from NPR talks about how Ecuador's justice system formally notified the Australian Assange of the nullity of his naturalization in a letter that came in response to a claim filed by the South American country's foreign ministry. Now, any country's naturalization process does have provisions to where if you make false statements, if you engage in naturalization fraud, you can have your citizenship taken away. And you saw this in the United States during the Trump administration when they took a more aggressive approach to going back through people's naturalization applications and looking at things and seeing, did someone make a false statement? When you look at applying for a visa to the U.S. or getting a green card or applying for citizenship, some of the questions that you'll see are you a terrorist? Now, is anyone actually going to admit to being a terrorist? I'd like to see who that person is. But what it does is it gives them the ability to go back later and figure out, you know what? Now we know you're a terrorist, and so you told us you're not. And so the terrorist part is irrelevant. You lied on your application. Now, in Julian Assange's case, it was a little bit different because this was kind of a special process done by then-President Lenin Moreno, who wanted to turn Assange into a diplomat, help him get out of the Embassy of London. So again, not exactly sure what happened there. Other stories in the news recently, Britain cannot remove ISIS members' citizenship without telling them, rules a high court. In the UK, a story from The Independent saying that Parliament did not give the Home Secretary power to stop notifying people they are no longer British by law. Basically, this was about suspected ISIS members who the British government wanted to cancel their citizenship, and there was some kind of procedure where the government was just like, one day you're British, one day you're not, and the court ruled, well, hey, you've got to tell people, you've got to have a certain process for this, and so they ruled to make it a little bit more difficult. New Zealand, an article from RNZ, talks about losing citizenship, what you need to know, and there was an ISIS-linked fighter who I believe was both Australian and New Zealand. Australia canceled his passport. They revoked her passport, actually. New Zealand did not do the same thing, and there were some reasons for that around the Citizenship Act of 1977, et cetera, et cetera. Now, hopefully we don't have too many ISIS fighters watching our videos, but the question is, can you lose a citizenship? So the biggest issue if you're going through a naturalization process, whether it's what we call paper residence that leads to naturalization, whether you're getting a golden visa and eventually you'll be naturalized, or whether you're actually going to move somewhere and, take up a home, learn the language, pay taxes, do all that, you are going to have to go through a procedure. Some countries more than others, but they're going to ask you some questions. And if you have some kind of fraud in your application, if there's some kind of deception, they can go back at some time in the future and they can revoke your citizenship. We've seen that in countries like Cyprus and in Bulgaria, which have residence or citizenship by investment schemes, or had in the case of Cyprus, where they went back and opened up inquiries into a number of people who, I think primarily Russians in both countries, who had done things that were untoward, who had not followed the proper procedures, and it had just made it through the system. They went back and said, well, wait a second, you shouldn't be a citizen. We're revoking your citizenship. You didn't follow the proper procedures. The same thing happens in citizenship by investment countries in a couple of instances. I'd say the most potentially damaging for someone watching this is if, obviously, again, you lie on the application. If you say that you haven't committed a crime and you had, generally most citizenship by investment programs cover all the bases. Has it been expunged? Has it been pardoned? Has anything happened at all? to get rid of that crime. Even if it's not in your criminal record, you have to disclose it. And so if they later find out that you had something, that could be grounds for saying you didn't tell us the truth, we're going to yank it. One of the other things that someone could lose their citizenship for is if you participate in an ineligible scheme for citizenship by investment. So if you go to certain parts of the world, you'll see deals where, let's say the citizenship donation amount is $100,000, St. Lucia, Dominica, what have you, but there's a real estate program on those islands. I'm not singling out those two, that's the lowest donation. But any of the Caribbean islands, any of the other programs, you could have a thing where, hey, there's a real estate developer who's going to not build a project. And I think generally it's known that the real estate developer is going to make up some drawings, maybe break a little bit of ground, and then the idea is not to finish the project, but just to sell the units, throw a huge kickback to the agent. The agent then throws a kickback to the client, and then the client goes through the real estate option. Rather than the donation, they go through the real estate, they invest there, let's say $200,000 or $300,000 in real estate. They get a huge kickback that brings the price down below the donation amount. And so that's something that you generally want to stay away from. And if you participate in something like that, that could be an issue. The other issue for a citizenship by investment program we've talked about before is, especially in the Caribbean, where the program is, the countries are very sensitive about, undue attention, is if you get involved in some kind of criminal activity later, some high-profile activity, that's probably going to come out on one of these small islands. And so there have been stories of people who've been accused of fraud, of money laundering. I mean, you can be sure if you have any of that stuff in your past, you're not going to get in. But if you have any of that stuff in your future, certainly the countries could bow to pressure to have your citizenship canceled. Or they may just do it themselves. They may just say, we don't want this kind of person. They may try and revoke your citizenship. And so there is coverage in certain media outlets like The Guardian where they talk about, in Vanuatu or this one or that one, there were a couple guys who had something weird. A lot of times the stories they talk about aren't even illegal. It's just people who are kind of weird or interesting or why are they doing it. But certainly, most of these countries do not want the attention. I mean, imagine you're trying to become a citizen through economic means in a Caribbean country or Vanuatu, you're trying to get a golden visa. You don't want the reputational issue of being sucked up with, isn't that the one where the diamond merchant who was moving the money? You don't want to be associated with that. So the governments are pretty sensitive to that. Now, a larger country, I mean, was a story in in Foreign Policy recently about how the U.S., lots of illicit money coming in for the EB-5 program. I think you probably see in a country like that, more issues than you see in a lot of other countries where they're a bit more on top of it. So, if you're not going to be a future criminal, if you're not already a criminal, then I really don't see a lot of risk as long as you play by the rules, as long as you complete the application honestly, as long as you disclose everything. If you're being naturalized, that you go through the proper procedures. Honestly, anytime you're going through improper channels, that can be a problem. And that's not even to mention the fact that, some of these deals where people are offering second citizenship in 14 days because a guy puts you in the system, or, some guy who works at the passport office prints out a passport with your name on it and gives it to you. I mean, that's obviously not official. You need to get a citizenship certificate. You need to go through the channels. No one's putting you in the system. You're not getting citizenship anywhere in 14 days. Now, if you think that because you're at some kind of political risk, then the answer would be to create some kind of passport portfolio. If you just think, hey, I'm a guy who, I'm in crypto, for example, and maybe that's something that countries won't like in the future. I don't even know where that would be an issue. But you could certainly get multiple citizenships, but I wouldn't be doing that on the basis, again, is the goody two shoes of the offshore world. I wouldn't be doing that to try and cover something up. I would just say if you think that you are at some kind of risk for some kind of other reason, then multiple citizenships are always an option. But generally, telling the truth, not being a criminal, not becoming a criminal, you'll generally be fine, and you'll be able to keep all the citizenships that you obtain for your Plan B. So people ask, Andrew, how do I get the most out of Nomad Capitalist? How do I begin my Nomad Capitalist journey? The first thing people do is they start right where you're at. They watch YouTube, they listen to podcasts, they read articles at nomadcapitalist.com. We've spent years creating thousands of pieces of free content so that you can get the vibe from someone who's actually done this, from someone who's actually been in your shoes. What they'll do next, they'll get a copy of the book. You can find it on Amazon. It costs a few bucks, and while it's not going to give you all the secrets, it's going to, again, give you more of the vibe. You're going to learn a lot of the things that I've learned. You're going to learn some strategies you can employ, and you're going to get a lot further in your journey. From there, If you are the 7 or 8 figure entrepreneur investor, you can go to nomadcapitalist.com. You can click Become a Client. We're pretty busy these days, but we have availability to help a limited number of people who want to create a holistic plan, something that I think is so important. So if you want to do that, go to nomadcapitalist.com, click Become a Client, learn more about how it works and how we can help you.